Welcome to the Board Edit. We want to help you to lead more boldly, serve wisely, and impact deeply.
Our goal is to equip 1 million community-minded leaders to serve with confidence. I'm your host, Craig.
And I'm your host, Dawn. Let's dive in.
All right, ready to jump in?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive in. We've got a topic here today that honestly, I find there's a lot of confusion about.
Yeah,
so I was really excited when you're like, yeah, that makes sense. And we do cover it in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's baffling to me, but then it also just makes sense that we all know what we know.
Right.
Based on where we've served before.
Right. Well, and it can also have a really big impact on how your board service is fulfilling and whether it aligns with that type of service experience you want to get out of it as well.
Yeah. So what we're going to unpack for you today is really something that every new and seasoned board member needs to understand. And that's that there are 5 types of boards.
Yep.
And, you know, what happens really when you love a mission, but you realize that maybe this is the wrong board for you, either because of your leadership style or maybe it's a season of your life. I always appreciate that you're so good at reminding us all, Craig, that sometimes it's okay to say no or to bow out.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so so let's really talk about sort of why board type matters.
Yep. So I think it goes back to a central theme in our book, in that it's about clarity and alignment. And to your point, it's about assessing whether it's the right fit, and having the self-reflection to do that check-in or that gut check. I know we say that a lot, but that's so true, because it's that moment to really understand whether this aligns with that experience, whether it aligns with your skill set, like whether it aligns, whether you can feel like you're adding value to those conversations. So when we talk about the 5 different board types, the other piece is that they're not all created equally, and that creates a lot of confusion. So we have different boards that start at different stages of the board life cycle. We have different boards that are either entering into a new season or exiting potential crisis, and it just calls for different types of leadership. And this is why when we talk about term limits and how many boards you serve on, like all of those things really go to this point, because if those pieces aren't in alignment, this definitely isn't going to fit the experience you want.
Yeah, because I think when we think about serving on a board, it's really about what the mission stands for. There's something that called you to it, whether it was, you saw an advertisement, it was something helping students, or you saw over a holiday that you could be involved in serving food in some way.
Right.
And then you go to a meeting only to find yourself frustrated.
Yep.
Either in the beginning or at some point, it's sort of unfolding and it doesn't feel aligned to what you thought.
Right.
And part of that really does go back to, so what type of board is this? Mm-hmm. And being able to uncover this for people, I think actually, again, our goal is to equip 1 million more people.
Right.
And both of us have been in situations where we found like, and it's hard to quit.
Right.
Like you feel like a quitter.
Yeah. Well, you feel like you're letting the mission down too, right? Which no one wants to feel like that.
Right. And then, but we have to listen to who we are today. And is this something that we can continue with until the board term ends, or until the role ends, or whatever it is? We have to be able to figure it out. Right. And that's why we really wanted to spend time today.
Yep. So starting with the 5 types, and this is one of those nonprofit board jargony ones, but it's so fitting for kicking us off. And that is the board that is called a working board, or board members that perceive they're working, but then don't really work, because we've all had and sat on those boards too. So when you hear working board as a structure, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I'm sure we're probably going to answer this in a couple of different ways.
Yeah.
So for me, when I hear working board, that means that because of lack of staff,
Right.
lack of resources to hire additional staff, the board actually has to get in there
Mhm.
and do some of those operational pieces
Right.
that just aren't staffed and equipped.
Right. So a lot of times it's younger organizations, younger boards. And to your point, when it starts to do those operational functions, it can then create confusion later on about staff versus board responsibilities and governance versus operational responsibilities. So how does a board that is considered a working board overcome that?
Well, I think that one of the things that you actually spearheaded and have developed, and I think we're going to have that available for people that are listening, is a very simple board
Right.
matrix. I think you really have to say, okay, so who makes what
Yep.
decisions? Because where you see things start to get tripped up is people believe that they have the authority to make the decision, or they question
Who
who has
does?
who has the authority
Yes.
to make the
Oh
decision.
boy, does that happen so often.
Yeah. And getting some clarity around that, because what's interesting is especially in these circumstances that make it so that board members need to be more working
Mhm.
engaged, they like that.
Right.
Right. And so then it almost feels like you're taking the role away from them in some way, or that they've done something wrong. Like, it's very interesting how it disrupts people
Mhm.
to then back out. And I know we're going to talk next about the governing board, but how to then back out and have that wider angle lens of perspective that a
Right.
governing board has to have. People almost feel like they've lost something. They've
Yeah.
lost control in some way. They've lost some ability to contribute in a way that they were actually
Yeah.
enjoying.
Or the flip side of that, you have those worker bee board members that recruits someone who thought that they were going to be more of an advisor or on a governing, and then the perception is they're not pulling their weight, they're not doing enough, when it was a clarity issue that that person was even recruited in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that board matrix that you have offered up, I think that it so well helps a board to review it, and
Yeah.
I would almost think that reviewing it annually
Hmm.
or when there's been a significant transition.
Yeah.
I think all I think both of us would say that in retrospect, if when we started as a CEO and we could have had that to sort of guide.
Hmm.
So after 6 months as a board member, I see that we can step back, because as a CEO, you should then be able to just inform us. The
Correct.
board at that point will not need to approve it.
Correct.
And that's really that dance and that bridge, I think, of going from a working board
Hmm.
to a governing board.
Sure.
But I guess that gives me a thought. So, can you foresee a circumstance where a board would always be a working board?
I don't think so, because boards and organizations naturally evolve.
Mm.
They go through those phases of a board life cycle where they're either building capacity to reach those different phases, or they're building resources to reach those different phases. So in my mind, like, that shows a healthy organization that is progressing forward, rather than, being so focused on the output that nothing else can happen. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a matter, and if we had that language within the nonprofit space of being able to say, hey, we need to lean in as a working board now because we have this staff member who is looking to move on.
Right.
Or, hey, we really don't have the funding because we need to pay out the benefits or whatever
Yeah.
for 3 months. Is there anybody that can step in? So I think, to your point, it's always about the evolution
Hmm.
and being clear
Yeah.
on the life cycle of the nonprofit. And it may be that different behaviors are needed at that
Mhm.
time, but that doesn't mean that we stay there.
Right. Well, and it can also lead to burnout, right? I mean, you can have
Hmm.
board members who have such a passion for it, but when that weight, they're carrying that weight for an extended period of time, it doesn't fulfill them anymore. That's not what they want to get out of it. And that's unfortunate because people want to feel successful. They want to feel like their time investment is accomplishing something. But when they're in the weeds, in the trenches every single day, I mean, that would burn anyone out.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, so I think this is kind of a natural segue because we've already been talking about the governing board.
Mhm.
And when we think about, governance boards are about oversight and strategy.
Right.
Like that is sort of that wide angle, being able to support the CEO. But that CEO really is the expert on the
Yeah.
policies, the
The
procedures,
driver of
the
it.
bylaws. Like they're the drivers of it.
Right.
They're the ones who help to guide the board, to educate,
Yep.
so that the governing board can stand up and stand out and stand back and all those different gyrations in order to give that oversight and
Right.
strategy.
Right. And I think this is where we see the biggest issues arise when there isn't clarity around those roles. It's what can easily deteriorate the relationship and the partnership between the board and the CEO because the board doesn't understand their role. Um, the day-to-day pieces are very tactile and tangible, so like for them that feels like they're accomplishing things, but on the staff side of it, it's either creating more work or it's creating barriers to efficiency. So there just has to be really open and honest conversations. I think that's where the recruitment matrix or the decision matrix comes in as well, because it really clearly outlines who is responsible for what. And you have certain ceilings and certain thresholds that under this it's a staff decision, over this it's a board decision. So it's not without guardrails, but it's meant to really simply and clearly identify whose job is what. And yes, the organization will have its bylaws and its policy manuals, and those are the foundation for what that organization needs. But you also need a quick high level roadmap because a lot of board members in reality aren't going to read all those policy documents.
Right. Yeah. And I think, when I think about board membership that has been disappointed,
Mhm.
like they find themselves on a board, they were called to the mission. Usually they're involved in another type of service project or some type of advisory committee,
Yep.
sort of offshoot. And that's how people get even more invested because that's what governing boards should have.
Yep.
They should have sort of this natural growth path for their volunteers. It's probably another podcast.
Write it
But
down.
if you like to do that hands-on, like direct service piece as a board member, like all the time in
Yep.
that program, a governing board may not be for you.
Right. And it's that self-reflection to acknowledge that it's not
Mhm.
a weakness or you're not equipped for it. That's not it at all. But the onus also falls on you to have those conversations with either the person that is recruiting you or the organization's CEO to really understand how that board functions. Because
Yes.
if it does not align with your values, it doesn't do right by anyone. It doesn't do right by the organization or the CEO and their staff, and it's just going to not be successful.
Yeah, and we talk about like cultural fit, mission fit, the fit that you bring in terms of expertise. And I think too that's why, especially for a governing board, that's why the matrix that
Mhm.
then people can Google it. We have one as well, but it's really where you look at what are the skill sets that are being brought to the board so that you're clear.
Right.
You do need people that serve on the boards that have had some type of lived
Right.
experience. Like that's always very important. And many times they may not have that side of governance that does like to get into the policy
Right.
and the strategic pieces. So it's a really nuanced skill, especially if whoever is facilitating those meetings. I think it's the CEO to like prep the agenda,
Mhm.
but then it's also whoever's facilitating that meeting, whether it's the chair or um, uh, whoever it is that is reporting to the board, to be able to engage all of
Right.
those members, knowing that you're having to dance
Mhm.
so that everyone understands what kind of board it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, what's another type of board that you
S-
find we kind of don't understand?
Fundraising board.
Okay, you were just hitting them all.
We're just might as well, right? Just ripping off the band-aid. So the fundraising
Mm,
board, I feel this is another misunderstood one.
mhm.
Um, and we do so much education and training and have just really honest conversations with the boards that are asked to do a fundraising component, that it's not just about them going out to get the dollar. It's more about resourcing the mission and opening doors. I just had a board member who simply sent a text message to one of their contacts and they became one of our biggest annual donors. She didn't make an ask, she didn't do anything else. It was, I want to connect you with the team at the organization I serve on the board with and let you guys go from there. And that was perfection. It didn't need to be any more complicated than that. They were representing and advocating for us. But I think there's such a big misconception about a board's responsibility for fundraising.
Yeah, and as a board member, if you are a board member of a 501c3, it doesn't matter what committee you sit on, it doesn't matter what role you sit in, you have the same fiduciary responsibility.
Right.
So every board member has a give get. And that get may be that you are serving on a state level committee or you're serving on a foundation board where you're able to be an ambassador for the mission. And, in another podcast episode that we have, it's, that's why serving on so many boards can quickly become a
Conflict,
conflict.
yeah.
And I think we really see it when our
Mhm.
boards need to be more of an advancement fundraising board.
Yeah. And with the conflict, it comes, cherry picking what donor goes to which cause. And it just,
Mhm.
people walk away with kind of a sour taste in their mouth. I mean, it's not why you should be serving in that role. And, when we talk about fundraising, it's really resourcing, right? It's resourcing with connections, it's resourcing with dollars. It's not just the bottom line on the financial statement either.
Yeah, and I think so. There's always a fundraising component to a governing board,
Mhm.
and I would also offer. And you tell me your experience, but I believe that every governing board has to have some type of advancement or fundraising committee. And advancement is a little jargony, but that is considered sort of that stewardship
Right.
of the donor. So
Right.
it's a little bit more than a fundraising, and I've had to learn that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in necessarily a philanthropic family that had like all that knew these words like
Right.
advancement. We knew, there was the Girl Scouts sold cookies, and that
Mhm.
was that was fundraising.
Yep.
So when you think about it, from that perspective, how then does a board really fully live into these fundraising components,
Yeah.
knowing that there's more to get to?
Right.
Because money can take over things.
Yes.
Money is the scaffold for everything,
Yes.
but you can quickly get into that's all we're talking about. And then you have other board members there
Mhm.
that are like, are we going to talk about why we're here, which is our
Yes.
mission?
And that's the difference between a nonprofit board versus a corporate board, which is really the pool that we're recruiting a lot of board members from. Their experience is more corporate. So their bottom line is purely financial. Whereas for a nonprofit, it's a dual bottom line, it's financial and mission delivery. You can't have successful mission delivery without money, but you also can't raise money if you're not serving clients or serving your mission. And that is kind of this bifold or bi-engine plane that a lot of organizations miss because they just focus on the balance sheet. And it's unfortunate because I think for those who are bought into the mission, it doesn't always leave a great taste in their mouth, but it can quickly frame being able to address community issues in a way that's entrepreneurial. When if you're just focused on the bottom line financially, you can miss those opportunities. And at the bottom or at the end of the day, that's why an organization exists. It's to address those community issues.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. Like that needs to be like its whole in terms of that dual purpose, that
Yeah.
dual bottom line. That is the way that you said that, I think is something that our listeners really need sort of take home is that
Mhm.
it's a financial bottom line, but it's a mission bottom line.
Right. Well, and it's nuanced, right? I mean, for example, our organization last year, we had a 150% increase in service delivery, but we actually spent less money. So our program overhead fee looked higher because we had less program expenses, but our mission delivery looked more successful because we just did it more efficiently. So, these conversations are nuanced. And especially for newer board members, it's not with this expectation that you're the expert on day one, but you are empowered to ask those questions and to seek clarity around how the organization measures itself.
Yeah, we may have to come back and talk about
Yeah.
money even more. Money.
Yep.
Yeah, and so, we talked about like sometimes if a governing board isn't sort of your skill set, there are these advisory committees,
Mhm.
and sometimes there are advisory boards, but there's a big difference in an advisory committee to a governing board and an advisory board,
Correct.
which many times people get appointed to.
Correct.
And that looks very different. And I see a lot of confusion in
Yeah.
this.
And a lot of times those are like blue ribbon task force or commissions where you're appointed. And sometimes it's just to have your name on the letterhead. Sometimes it's more of your position and your standing to represent that cause than it is to really be sought out for any deep level advisement. But then on the flip side of that, you can have advisory boards attached to a governing board that is meant to be sometimes a higher level, more macro focused group of advisors or counselors. Sometimes it's past president councils, sometimes it's emeritus members that are engaged for a very specific reason.
Yeah. And the amount of expertise that can be added from that is big. But again, it's about reviewing the lane,
Hmm.
reviewing what our purpose is. Being able to have that clarity allows everyone to, I think, live into the complexities
Hmm.
of providing the meal, providing the book,
Yep.
providing the shelter for someone in need. And I think too, term limits, again, I'll go back to that. Term limits are important.
Yep.
I can think of especially for sort of an advisement board that is of past chairs
Hmm.
or emeritus members, that sort of thing. Like, we also have to be very clear with people in terms of what we're asking,
Right.
and that includes the length of time.
Yep.
I always say, I want to know my term limit
Hmm.
because I know that I need to be preparing for the next person. And
Right.
that applies to everything we've talked about already.
Yep. Well, and if an organization isn't willing to quantify that for you, that is a major red flag, right?
Yes.
Because they either don't know or they're not tracking it or there isn't a procedure for it when it should be in the bylaws. So definitely a red flag to watch out for if you're asking those conversations or asking those questions and not getting that in response to the conversation.
Yeah. So we've done 4,
Hmm.
if I'm tracking correctly,
That's
right?
right. One
Right?
more.
One more.
Yep. And
One
that
more. You want
is
to take it?
That's the hybrid board,
Hmm.
which is where confusion can abound because you have elements of governance, fundraising, working, and kind of getting your hands involved in it. But it goes back to the central theme of this entire episode, which is clarity and making sure that it is really clear what the ask is of those board members,
Mhm.
when they're going to deliver on that ask, how they're going to deliver on that ask, and having that very very succinctly captured for them, because I think this is where mission drift can occur. It's where, or mission creep, it can create kind of this vagueness that without definition can create issues.
Yeah, and the whole piece about clarity is, and I wish I had learned that, I think, earlier in my career, is there always has to be a refocus,
Hmm.
right? I think especially when you're on a policy or a hybrid board, it's really important that the members have access to the documents.
Right.
I mean, I think that's true in all
Of
in a
course. Yeah.
governing board, but being able to refer back to what it is we're making a decision on, because it's so easy to get slippery slope in any of this. And offer based on your personal or professional experience, the background, when
Mhm.
actually that does not fit in the board you're currently sitting
Right.
at.
Right.
Um, yeah. So that clarity creates confidence piece, I think, is a key phrase.
Right.
It's a key phrase that we would want all of our listeners to go back to and to ask for it, and we talk about it a lot in the book. We'll talk about it even more on subsequent podcasts. But finding that voice as a
Mhm.
member, it's okay to say, hey, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you help me with this?
Yep.
First board I've ever served on like this. And I just want to be clear, like how this fits, or can you explain that more?
Or why am I here? Like, why was I recruited? Was it
Hmm.
for my time? Was it for my ability to give? Or was it my skill set, the time, treasure, talent triad that a lot of people have heard of? So yeah, being able to ask that question and the why is important for that organization to be able to articulate as well.
Hmm. And for the listeners, so let's just give some examples, I guess.
Okay.
So if we're thinking about a hospital authority board, what type of board do you feel like that should be?
Should be a governing board. I
Okay.
don't I don't want a board member operating on me in the hospital, do you?
Point taken.
Yeah. Yep.
Point taken. So if we're thinking about a regional airport authority, what what is that?
I think it could go a couple ways. I think it could be governing because it's at that strategy regional level that you're recruiting very intentionally to serve on. It could also be very advisory. It might just be, um, certain prominent stakeholders that they want to give a certain level of credibility with their board. How about
Hmm.
you?
Yeah, I'm going to go policy kind of hybrid,
Hmm.
because you're obviously there because of appointment,
Right.
usually of like a municipal or a governing body that's
Yeah.
elected. Usually, I think. And I think that's part of the clarity that our listeners need to ask
Hmm.
for is, how is this created?
Yep.
Because that will lead you very quickly to know, are you a government entity, sort of, and you're
Right.
just an extension of responsibility of a government body, or are you established because of truly a mission in the community that was untapped? Like
Right.
that would be a very clear. So what about, because there's a lot of national organizations, like, or international even, like your Red Cross and your YMCA's and your Boys and Girls Clubs, just to name a few.
Mhm.
And a lot of times they have a sort of a central board, and then they also have sort of facilities and advisory boards.
Mhm.
And what can happen, I know even in the organization I have, some of the funders actually even require advisory boards.
Right.
And there can be contention
Yeah.
if people on the advisory committees feel like they're part of the governing board.
Yeah, or they might misrepresent that they are a board member, which is not accurate either.
Yeah. And so, again, going back to sort of that clarity, even if it's on an agenda for people listening, it's like, well, how do I keep clarity about this? And it's like, well, on the agendas and like
Mhm.
ask. So I just want to be clear, as an advisory committee meeting. I mean, sometimes you have to like say it out loud,
Yeah,
um, and to know sort of where you fit.
yeah,
But regardless of all of that, right, being called to a mission
hmm,
does not mean that you need to say yes.
that's right.
Your heart can be so called,
Yep.
but it's not a right fit.
Or if it evolves and it no longer is a right fit,
Mhm.
being able to say, this is just not the right fit for me at this point, or seasons in your life change and it just doesn't fit within your schedule from a very tactical perspective, being able to say no is just as important as being able to say yes. And I think that's for people being able to understand that and feel that release of being able to say no, like it helps both that person as well as the organization.
Yeah, and one of the things that we offer are sort of these three alignment questions. When you find yourself in this way, and one is mission fit. Does this organization's purpose still resonate with my values?
Mhm.
Right? And again, it could be a season of life. It could be a revelation now that you're more intimately involved in the
Right.
organization. And again, that's okay. Like, honor your humanness.
Yep.
And then we have the board types. We've gone over 5 today.
Right.
We think that pretty much covers. If not, please
Let
email
us know.
us.
Yeah.
And
You've
let us know.
uncovered a sixth, though.
Yeah, let us know and we'll record an episode on that. Help us out. And then cultural fit, right? It's like, does this board's way of operating align with how I want to lead?
Yeah. And that will really be covered on another episode about culture, because culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that if the culture of how that board does business does not align with your personal values, it's going to create conflict. There is going to be contention because of misalignment.
Yeah. And, I think that what we would want all of our listeners to know, if that's something that happens, know that there is another organization who would be open and have those life skills. Honestly, I think this is why you have term limits.
Yep.
Because it's going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There should be an expectation like that is going to happen.
Right.
But
Well, and nor does it require you to serve out the full length of that term either. Like if something changes and you need to resign early and not fulfill it, that is okay. That is okay.
Yeah, because everything is for a season.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think we've ended this one.
I think so.
Yeah. We hope you've enjoyed listening to us today. And again, just remember those 3 questions, right? If you can't remember anything else, mission fit, board type fit, cultural fit, and use that as discernment as you're thinking about the type of board that you sit on.
That's right. Until next time, thanks for joining.
Are you ready to sharpen your board skills? Consider taking our online classes at theconfidentcompanyus.com. We want to give you the tools, and we want you to be able to show up in your next meeting with confidence.